Roger.
Okay, great. So this is Extinction Rebellion World event. Thank you very much for coming along. And today we're going to have a skill and knowledge sharing session with Will from Portland in the US about fundraising and tabling and related topics. I'm going to give a little introduction and I'm going to pass over to Will. I might sort of interrupt you every now and again, Will, maybe, or just summarize what you're saying in so much as I've got some experience of what you've been doing as well. And after about 50 minutes or so, we'll pass over to Andre. I'm going to have to pop off, but I'll pass on to Andre for any questions. And of course, people should be able to contact you, Will, after this session if you want a one-to-one Zoom with any sort of details. So it's very much about networking and people helping each other and everything like that. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little sort of summary of where this situation is at on fundraising. There's been a bit of a complex relationship, let's put it like that, in Extinction Rebellion, in my view, between fundraising and activism in XR. And one of the reasons why we haven't really had to deal with it that much is because there's been quite a voluntary sort of ethic, which has got its pros and cons, and also various rich people around the world threw a lot of money at XR in the early days, and that's more or less dried up. And I think one of the main reasons why we want to do fundraising ourselves is that we don't, for lots of fairly obvious reasons, want to entirely depend or even depend at all upon rich people who, you know, very, very nicely have supported us, but obviously it's not necessarily the way to grow a social movement to exclusively rely on that sort of funding. So the other thing to say is that XR's got this amazing brand, if that's the right word to use. It's recognized around the world. I think in the UK, 69% of people know it, or was it 59? Anyway, there's a lot of people and has a higher recognition than a lot of the NGOs. But in the UK, the NGOs, I think, raise something like £50 million a year, and XR raises something like $250,000 or something, if that. So there's a massive potential for raising money, and that's why we're having this session. And I think the two reasons really to do it are to do with sustainability, as I mentioned, but also if you just have a volunteer organization, then what inevitably happens is you get a bias towards people who work full time, who for various reasons can afford to work full time. Either they're middle class people who've got plenty of money, or they're more older people who are on a pension and what have you. And there's a sort of structural bias against younger people who might have loads of talent and certainly need to have experience of working full time in this sort of thing. So there's a good radical social justice reason, as you might say, for raising money because of the equity argument. And lots of the criticisms of XR, quite rightly, is it's got this sort of middle class bias, and it's not surprising if we can't afford to fund and support people who want to work full time, who are either young or working class or whatever. So the other last thing to say in terms of setting the scene is there's a lot of evidence now, and we saw this last week when we did Rosa's presentation, that if you want to do really systematic mobilization, then you want to combine full-time people with part-time people, and full-time people are absolutely essential to get a systematic system, you know, approach sorted out in terms of setting up groups every 2 or 3 weeks or whatever in your area. And of course, if you want people to work full-time, it's worth having some voluntary living expenses to support those people who are really talented but simply can't afford to give up their day job. So this isn't a little add-on issue. I think it's absolutely central to the civil resistance model that we're developing, that we have at least some people, 10 or 20 or 30 people in an XR mobilization in a country who have paid a minimal amount of money to get on and work full time. And this is what raises the money raises the ability to get thousands of people on the street. So that's a roundabout way of saying this is really important. And the good news is that Will is going to go through some fantastic sort of evidence that shows how this can be done. And what I just want to raise is two other little points. One is that a lot of people think fundraising is really straightforward. It's not. It's really complicated and highly skilled activity. And there's lots of what are called micro design elements, how you speak, what you say to people, what pieces of paper you give them, how you ring them up. These are all highly influential on whether people end up, supporting you on a regular basis. And I for my sins, I've spent 20 years doing canvassing, and a good canvasser can have 3 or 4 times the amount of returns than someone who's new. And that's because they just know how to do it. So what we're going to hear from Will is some know-how, and obviously there's quite a lot of practice on it. And as we'll hear from Will, one of the key elements here is to pay people who are going to fundraise, because that provides a professionalism and a consistency and mathematically produces the return that we need. And this is what all the NGOs do. And no disrespect to them, but XR's needs to be up there with the NGOs so we can learn a thing or two from them, I would suggest. So on that note, I'm going to pass over to Will. Hopefully I haven't stolen his thunder. And so Will, do you want to sort of give a general introduction then, and then we'll take it from there? And I might just interrupt every now and again just to clarify viewpoints and summarize things, and then you can carry on. But off you go. Basically, the stage is yours.
So yeah, I started with the Extinction Rebellion in the fundraising aspect of it last summer when XRA began, and I think it evolved a lot over that time. And so how we did it in the beginning was not the same as how we did it now, and also it's depended a lot on the locations too. Like how it went in Los Angeles was not the same as how it is here in Portland. When I did some traveling, Los Angeles is 1,200 miles away in a different state, right? And also how it is during the pandemic is a lot different than, when there's no pandemic, right? Because of who's going to talk to you and whether or not you're wearing a mask. And now with restrictions easing, things are even more spicy at the table because it's a real combination of people. So yeah, so it's not really, so it's, I mean, you could expect different results for the different locations. Roger, am I right on track here? Or
yeah. Keep going. Sounds great.
Right. So there's a number of strategies I've been trying to employ and improve upon that I've noticed that bring more success. Like one of them, like Roger kind of hinted to, is era of professionalism. It's a state of things that basically, if the more professional the table is, the more likely people are to donate. And I don't really, sometimes I don't even really see a limit to this, except for possibly what you're wearing could make a difference. Like maybe you could be dressed too professionally in some areas, but for the most part, like the table itself and what you're presenting should be really high. I think highly professional, just because people like a sense of organization, and there's a lot of empirical data to or not empirical, but qualitative data for social movements to support that. But yeah, having hand sanitizer around, having good mask quality. Um, I mean, there's a lot of, I think there's probably a lot of arguments to be made for like having a cloth mask versus a medical grade mask. But those medical grade masks, you could hear yourself really well, or people could hear you really well through them. They don't muffle you at all, and so even though they are disposable, they also have an air of like professionality. So I tend to use the medical mask because I've never been able to locate like a really good cloth mask. So, um, but it works. So as far as the table goes, this has just been something I've been building up over time. So originally it was just black and white stuff, having or black and white stuff on colored paper, but now it's like really professionally printed literature. Um, I've gone through different phases where I had all different kinds of literature on the table. A number of different books, like This Is an Uprising, and all your typical social movement books, as well as Roger's book and This Is Not a Drill, just sitting on the table or in different various locations to spark conversation. But I'm now at the point where I'm tired of people picking up random books and like redirecting the conversation at the wrong point. So I only have two books. This Is Not a Drill and Roger's book are on the table, and that's it. So eliminating distractions, I found to be another key key effect. So having the table not only well organized and in full, but um, free of distractions that can derail the argument. Like a famous one for me is like having Greta's book on the table. Love Greta's book, and I am always talking about Greta at the right time and stuff and everything. But there's just as many times Greta will completely derail the conversation and basically end the possibility of fundraising for that conversation. Um and so rather than take the risk, I'm just focusing on what's really going to maximize success and have a low probability of derailing a conversation. um because ultimately, not to skip to the end here, but ultimately there is just a 3 or 4 minute conversation that you're going to have repeatedly, that I've had repeatedly. And like this might change for location and country, like I imagine dramatically, but for in the US and for this city, there's basically one 3 or 4 minute conversation that's just the money conversation, and that will get like 60% of, or even 70% of your the fundraising conversations closed and successful, while the last 30% are just random. Like they could be somebody who lives in a different state. Um, who knows? Like people who are just traveling through. Um, people who donate just because they like you, or who knows? Like it could be a lot of other reasons through other meandering conversations and stuff and your personality and whatnot that could end in a successful canvas. But um and yeah, some people will donate within a couple of minutes and some will do it within 9 minutes. But for me, I'm finding that 3 to 4 minute conversation, that like template, is like the conversation. And having that conversation is like, okay, cool, I did it, and here they are, and oh my gosh, they're donating. Just the very fact that you were able to have that conversation, um, you know, makes you feel confident and ends in success. So it's really that 3 or 4 minute conversation that I kind of try to gear everything towards. And if it happens, it happens. Sometimes it won't happen because of the general opposition, or the you know um, them wanting to control what you talk about and all that. So I have an opening conversation. So obviously this is tabling, right? So people are walking by my area. I've chosen an area where I feel people have a high degree probability of not only walking by once, but walking by twice because um, there's related locations around that they might want to visit all of them, right? So I'm in a highly traffic conversational place. Um, I am stopping people. You know, people don't want to be stopped, but um, so the best way to do this is with you know, body language, eye contact, engagement, um, confidence. If it helps to, you know, warm up the vocals, that's a really good thing to do. Um, meditation between people so that you're not getting your conversations mixed up or your moods mixed up. You want to give everybody a fresh start or a fresh outlook. Um, so, you know, just calmly breathing. It may even be worth, you know, letting a few people walk by if you feel like you're off from the last conversation. So a good example of body language would be, or uh, a a waving down strategy would be just, you know, making eye contact, being like, hey, do you want to talk about saving the planet? So hold on, I even have to breathe a little bit. Hold on. So hey, do you want to talk about, or hey, how's it going? Do you want to talk about saving the planet? Hey, hi. So I'm. It's hard to do without somebody here, even for me who've done it so many times. But you get the idea. It's like, hey, how's it going? Or hey, how's it going? Hey, do you want to talk about saving the planet? And if you fail like two or three times in a row, you could feel like you're just drowning. So just taking time to breathe and everything could help. But another thing is a gesture, right? So it really helps to make an open gesture like this, like putting our arms out. Really, for some reason, putting my arms out really helps. And not only that, when I put my arms out like this, like they tend to look down at my table, which is weird. So like this might change per location, but I find when I put my arms out like this, they look down at the table, and when they look down at the table, they see like a professionally set up table, and then they're like, okay, yeah, what's going on? And if the tables, if the mood is good and the sun is hitting and everything, like the table actually becomes another thing in the area. So like this is a highly hip, cool area to be in. And then suddenly there's this cool table. And then like they're like, yeah, you know, this is what I came down here for. Um, and so there's that aspect of it as well. Like Portland is the number one vegan location in the United States. We have the most vegan restaurants per capita. So a lot of people even are, you know, already like-minded kind of as well. But, you know, the location I'm in doesn't have a really great vegan restaurant. It has a vegetarian restaurant, which is kind of a bougie. It's even kind of a little bit bougie, which isn't necessarily always what people are going for here. And it has a lot of, you know, elements to it that are like platform shoes and, you know, things that are often interesting but not very environmentally oriented. So I'm occupying a very unique space too. Like they could just be an edgy person who wants to be in an edgy place, and then I have something that's like really relevant that they can do to save the planet, and then they're interested in talking to me. So I get a lot of, you know, cultural interest from that, right, as well. Um, so like, yeah, it's going to be highly dependent on where you are. Like if I set up at the farmer's market, which I set up a lot there too, I'm going to get a completely different crowd, right? Like you have to be in a completely different mentality. Um, you have to be willing to go into the depths of many different kinds of conversations, because you'll find like really intelligent, um, environmentally minded people at a farmer's market. Um, and the 3 or 4 minute conversation might not be as easy to execute in a place like that, but still important. So that's a little bit about that bit of the conversation. So identifying and eliminating the people who are in active opposition. So it's unfortunate that a lot of the people that really want to talk to you for the longest time aren't going to end up ever coming to an event or anything. They just love talking about this kind of stuff, or even even in like in an oppositional kind of mindset. And you know, it's unfortunate, but in the professional capacity, you can't really indulge these people too much. I just said these people, but you can't indulge everybody too much. To a certain extent, it's great, but what I like to have is like I have a set of like what I call my burner flyers that are really kind of like to the point and do a little bit of climate education or a little bit more abrasive, um, that I'll try to give to people who are a little bit more in active opposition, and say, yeah, here's some great information, and read up and whatnot. I got to kind of get back to what I'm doing. I I'd make an excuse of that nature, like I've got to do a lot of I've got to talk to a lot of people, or something like that, to let them know that you are busy and you are professional and you can't spend a huge amount of time. Um, so yeah, identifying that, that's just going to come with experience, I think. But once again, having that 3 or 4 minute conversation in mind could help, because it's almost like that. Now it's like an alarm goes off in my head when I get to 7 minutes or something. It's like, whoa, this is this is not going to go how I want it to go. Um, let's see here. So a big aspect of this, and a fun aspect as well, is the research. So every day when I go home, I'm researching stuff, right? Um, like the right to rebel was one of the first ones that I really started to try to research a lot, because um, you talk about this idea and you hear about it, but like knowing it and knowing how to sum it up quickly for people is important, because it's all about sound bites, right? And you've got to relate these sound bites in a very short period of time if it's going to even fit into your 3 or 4 minute conversation. Um, so and so eliminating these like gaps in your knowledge at in the evenings is a big part of it. So right to rebel was a fun one. Gandhi, I've had a lot of success with. He's just like an old stalwart kind of. Um, it could add a minute to the conversation, but it could be pretty powerful, especially if you've got some personal affinity with talking about Gandhi or MLK. Um, so I mean, some of these topics can be a little bit more laborious, but um, really pay off and make people have people understand that what you're talking about. Um, so the demands. Another thing that it's good to research, what the demands are for Extinction Rebellion. How they relate to the local area. Um, I just stick to the demands. So, I mean, I think it's the one of the biggest drivers of interest and keeping people focused on what we're talking about. Um, so knowing, because our local government already declared a climate emergency, but it was set for 2050. So that's way too far in advance. Kind of. So it's good to know, like what 2050, what net zero is. Looking up these things, figuring out really good ways of explaining net zero. Using metaphors and things like that. And then also the history of a citizens' assemblies, and that's also a big one. So finding unique and interesting ways of explaining what a citizens' assembly is, quickly, because like you're lopping off a lot with these conversations, right? Like you're not be able to say how bad the climate really is, and you're not gonna be able to say how great Extinction Rebellion is and how intricate it is, but you could kind of give an idea of both sides of it within that 3 or 4 minutes. Um, let's see the conversation pattern. So, all right, so I'm going to get into this conversation. So, um, this script is pretty new. It used to be for the first 3 or 4 months that the entire script was based on rhetorical questions, um, and this is because I had this fear of them not being engaged enough, and so I would lead them through rhetorical questions until pretty much the very end, and then I would ask them to sign up. And what I found was that it was not only frustrating for people to answer a series of rhetorical questions like a Socratic method, but also I was losing a lot of folks. And it was difficult for me too. And it was also very difficult to often like direct the conversation properly at times because of the rhetorical nature of way people answer questions and stuff. So I have a very, very strict Canvas strip that asks a very limited number of questions. It looks like I think 3 questions right now that I really ask, 3 or 4. So number one, it's do you want to talk about saving the planet? Should I share? I think I should share screen at this point. Um, can I do that? Oh yeah, I can. Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah. All right. So here's my canvassing script. So it's number one. Do you want to talk about saving the planet? If they say no, you could, if you feel like it, you can hand them a flyer. If you, especially if you got a number of them. Um, like I said, I have those burner flyers that are kind of like a little bit more abrasive that I feel kind of they kind of, but it also kind of gives me some confidence to kind of hand them out to people and stuff. Um, uh, do you think about climate change often? Is the next question. Now, there's a legend, I think, if you will, amongst canvassers about getting them to say yes 3 times. So this question actually results in a yes rather than what do you think about climate change, right? Um, so do you think about climate change often? And then they say yes, and that's great. Um, uh, do you live in a local area, or in this local area? So yeah, like most of my fundraising is done in the Portland area. Right now we have 95 people within 10 miles of Portland giving monthly, um, which is pretty darn good, right? So I've been closing the radius, more and more every week when I get more people, to the point it used to be, within 50 miles of Portland, because it includes part of Washington and all of Oregon. I had about 100 people. Now I've closed the loop to 95 people within 10 miles of Portland. So do you live in the local area? This is like one of the most important questions you could ask, because if they don't live in the local area, if they live in another state, you're going to want to you're going to want to have a national script handy. Um, this is kind of the outlier, right? This is one of the outliers. So, a certain percentage will come from the national script, but we won't cover that today. We're going to just stick to the local script. And I would probably stick to the local script for the first month or 2 of doing this, because that's where you're going to get most of your money. And for the global or national or whatever script, just kind of wing it. Just go, go be yourself and hope for the best. Because things will happen on their own. You don't have to have everything perfect, right? But yeah, hopefully they live in the local area. And so there's 2 options that I see here. The one we've always had, because when we started raising money, the government had already declared a climate emergency. As did you know we declared it a climate emergency? Most people don't know that. Did you know the plan is for 2050? And most people don't know that at all. And then, does net zero by 2050 sound like a good date? So this part is really, really interesting. So um, this is the first time in most conversations that it gets interesting, because there's really three different ways they can go when you ask them, is net zero by 2050 a good date? They could be emphatically no. That's great. So you're off to the races. You can kind of finish your script. But most people, or I would say maybe 2/3 of your folks, are going to be like, man, I don't know if we could do it by then, right? Which is the absolute wrong attitude. I mean, maybe you could fundraise off of that, but I wouldn't feel very well about myself if I was doing that. So um, rather than let them, have this idea, um, I say, well, actually, the problem with net zero by 2050 is, even if we were able to do that, it's way too late, right? And then I ask them, do you know what net zero means? And then I have some explicit metaphors, um, and explicit metaphors and descriptions that are absent of actual mathematical numbers, that kind of explain why net zero by 2050 is too late. Um, and then so that's one option. So that's probably the trickiest one, is, oh yeah, we could, I don't know if we could get to it there, but 2050, all right. Like, that is the worst. uh the second one that you might run into is is uh is so let's see. So yeah, oh, I don't know if we could get there. And then there's, oh, that's or they'll say, oh, that's great, that's an awesome goal, right? And then you just say, like, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, no, it's not an awesome goal, um for these reasons, right? You need to give them metaphors and explicit descriptions and kind of get them concerned. I mean, if you do it correctly, um they should they should get concerned. I mean, I scare myself when I talk about what net zero by 2050 means, because by definition we're making things worse for 30 years, right? We're at a net positive. um so at that point, right, once I've got them a little bit concerned, I don't necessarily go into, like, the geophysical systems or anything like that, because we've already established that they're concerned about the climate, right? Like, I mean, we're trying to get them to donate and get excited about Extinction Rebellion. So I'm not really, like, trying to scare them at this point, right? So yeah, so we're Extinction Rebellion, right? So at this point, like, all right, cool, I'm going to go into the end of my script. I'm comfortable with them. I've got the whole thing framed properly. um, I know where they live, I know how they feel about the climate, and I've got their engagement. And so I tell them, like, this, we're Extinction Rebellion, right? I didn't make this up. This is from the UK. They did this great action in 2019. You can go into that if you like, but not even really necessary. But we're Extinction Rebellion. This is, our demand is for 2025. This is the most radical demand out there. I don't usually hit on all the demands, but depending on their level of interest, I might hit on additional demands. Um, we believe in civil disobedience because of X, Y, and Z. Like, you can just go into one aspect of it, or all three, depending on who you're dealing with, right? Um, like, it's important not to get too laborious with the discussion, right? Um, we've done X, Y. Oh, so this part, this is where it gets good, right? So at this point, the conversation's really got to take a turn if you want to maximize success for this 3 or 4 minute conversation that I'm talking about. Um, so we've done this and we plan to do this to get the government to act. So this is where storytelling comes in. Um, um, I mean, it's really easy to say, we got 100 people out there and occupied for this long. Is it the same as, doing storytelling? So like one of our rebels purchased a boat, and she painted it pink with Extinction Rebellion colors and whatnot. And then another one of our rebels rented a truck and towed this boat out onto the Morrison Bridge. And then several of us, as we agreed upon, we chained ourselves to this boat and occupied the bridge for 3 or 4 hours. And the police came and the media came, and we had vegan food and music, and it was this really great action. And so you're doing like a little bit of a storytelling kind of thing. And then we're going to do this every month. We're going to go out there every month, and we're going to get bigger and bigger. And we need to keep doing this. And we need, and then the next part, of course, is like, we need people like you, right? We need people like you to come out and come to meetings and come to actions. Um, we're also looking for folks to donate $5 or $10 a month, right? $5 or $10 a month to keep the momentum going, or to get things started, or something like that. Um, so it pivots from storytelling to like putting them into the story, right? Um, and then we've got a sign up sheet. So if this sounds interesting to you, if you'd like to help out, that's another key word for me, is like if you'd like to help out, is scan this poll and take this poll. Um, it's really easy and helps us get the numbers up, right? And so they scan the poll, and then by the time they get to the end of the poll redirects them to a fundraising page, and then they're able to donate. Now, the poll is an interesting part. Like for me, like it's automatic a lot of the times now, but sometimes it's difficult to get them to make a decision. Um, and at that time, it's really good idea to be able to say, like, if they're like, I could take the poll. Well, they're looking at it like, oh, I might take the poll, or might not take the poll, or okay, now I know about the poll, and maybe they'll be bored. Oh, we'll give you a free button if you take the poll, and then they take the poll. So, um, and so then just an air of professionalism. So is really handy with the poll. So with the poll, a lot of people will sit there and like start asking you questions during the poll, or you might even keep talking to them while they're doing the poll. And this is the absolute wrong thing to do. It's a trap. Um, while they're taking the poll, you just got to be as silent as possible. You know, look around at your table. Reorganize things. Um, maybe play music. Maybe don't play music, depending on the vibe. Um, and just kind of really allow them to. But if you play music, don't play anything with too many lyrics or anything like that. Um, and really let them just kind of like go through the poll. And then at the end of the poll, they might donate. If you could pay attention to the moment that they get to the donation screen, and then remind them about how important it is and how it is monthly, but it's really important and helps things get going. Um, and then just step back and let them think about it. This is when it works best, because they may not be really ready to make a decision right away, but if you give them the moment to like look at it, and if you kind of just stand there like, look, I got the stuff, right? I've got the shirt, I've got the flyers, I've got buttons, I've got posters. um, you know I'm here servicing this movement here to serve you, providing the good stuff, right? Like, go ahead and take the next step, is the kind of the attitude that I think goes the furthest. Um, and you know, 1 out of 3 times or 1 out of 4 times they will donate at that point. Um, Now, getting them to show up to an action or something like that is a whole nother trick. Um, uh, but at least they're making donations, right? Um, so it might turn out that they don't want to donate, or they put the thing away, or put their phone away at that point. Um, if they do, I mean, it's important not to panic, right? So it's not over, right? They're still capable of showing up to like a meeting or something like that. It just so happens that in my particular area, and this might be different from place to place, the most likely thing that people are going to do is donate. Like, we might get 30 donations in a week, but only or 30? No, maybe that's more like, maybe that was a month. But you might get 10 or 15 people committing to monthly in a week. But um, you might only get 1 or 2 showing up to an action or a meeting, that week, because it's much harder to get their physical commitment than it is to get their money, at least where I am currently. Um, but, that being said, a lot of the people who show up aren't going to be donating. So, um, what I like to do at this point is be like, oh, you don't look like the sort of person who's going to jump into that, or, you know, something, saying something to the effect of, trying to get them back involved and working on their other asks. Um, Finding out, remember, while they're looking at the thing, you do have a lot of time to, size them up, think about them, and decide, like, oh, is this person, like, going to show up to an action or a meeting? Like, what do you think? Like, and is this person really going to donate, or are they not going to donate? So maybe you can figure that out ahead of time. I mean, that could be a little dangerous. It turns out that most of the people that we've been getting have been in the age of 20 to 30. And, like, from what I understand, this is like a really bad age to have people donating monthly, because they're not going to be our consistent donors. Um, but I never made any prejudgments, and so I ended up getting a lot of people like that. I even had a 16-year-old donate monthly. Actually, I think I've had 2 under 18 donating monthly. Um, so there's no real reason to prejudge. They could end up donating monthly. Even people that said they're unemployed end up wanting to donate monthly. So um, there's no real reason to prejudge. But once they've made the decision that it's no, like, yeah, you've got to pivot to, getting them to come to a meeting, getting them to come to an action or something, because a lot of folks, may end up donating later on, like, in a couple months or a year. It just so happens that 95% of the people who do donate do it right there at the table. So it's like, which makes it really convenient, right? Like, if 95% of the people are going to donate right there at the table, there's really no reason for me to put any pressure on them once they've put that thing away. So it's like we're building up all this pressure on donation, and then all the pressure kind of goes away, and we're into a completely another sphere of reasoning, where we're trying to get them to come to an action or a meeting. And a lot of times this is about, identifying what they're interested in. And this is an art that I've not mastered nearly as well. Um, like I said, I'm still, a couple people a week, but where I've had success is when I've been able to I identify more about them. So maybe this could be something I could improve on, like, asking more questions about who they are and whatnot beforehand. Um, it's just, people don't like to be, put on too much. So if you're overly interested in them, they might just think that that's how you're going to get their money. Like, so it's okay to be like the driver of the conversation. That's where we're getting the most success. So I guess that's the whole thing. I mean, that's at once they've done that electronic poll. I mean, I'm not even mentioning the physical sign up sheets. I mean, the poll itself asks for their phone number and email, and both are required, right? Um, and if they don't want to do both of them, no big deal. Also, but you can do physical signups. Like if they really don't want to do the poll, or if they just want to donate, you might want to have just a link handy for them to just donate, or for them to I just want to donate monthly or whatever. Let's see here. So and then having another additional way for them to sign up, like a sign up sheet or something like that, if they just want to go the old school method. You get folks that way as well. But 9 out of 10 are just going to do the poll. So after that, I always follow up with them. I send text. I go home. I send texts out. I make phone calls, and that takes it could take 30 minutes. It could take a couple hours, depending on how many people you talk to. And that's it. I have a queue. So my phone. So the first day I text them in the evening, and then the second day I give a phone call. And the reason being is that a lot of people are traveling, so it doesn't really make sense for me to call them that night if they're traveling, because they're obviously they had to stop once for me already. So I'll call them the next day and, oh, are you guys home yet or whatever. So yeah, so those are my that's my methodology for follow up is text the first day and then call the second day, and then I might call them once more, and then I kind of let them drop into a general pool of updates and texts and emails, kind of thing. I think that's pretty much it. So a little bit more about the conversation length. So less than 2 minutes is not good, because it's just like they think it's pick up a flyer and go. And after 5 minutes, like I said, can be just a disaster most of the time. In the 3 or 4 minute range is your golden range for us. Anyways, all right.
Thank you, Will. That was awesome. Roger's had to bail on us. So let's head into some questions and answers. That was very comprehensive. Thank you. I've made a note of a few things that came to mind. And I can see Anne is already asking in the chat, where does one get this poll? Are you using a poll that other people can use? Did you construct something specifically?
Yeah. So I just changed the poll yesterday, but so my new poll I think might be better than the old poll, but I kind of maybe I'll use it first myself before I distribute it. The old poll is a little social sciencey. It's based on a study by Snow and Benford. That was done in the 70s about why people leave social movements, I guess. But I'm going to see if I could find the poll really quick in my browser. Then I'll share it.
I was curious to know whether you have any thoughts on ideally how long a poll like that should be. How broad do you make it? How narrow do you make it? The ending on the link through to the donation page or facility, I think already is a great idea.
Oh yeah, yeah. The donation has to be monthly for that link. So if you I don't know about the technical. Oh wait, I think I just pasted the wrong thing. Hold on. Should be the. Let me see. There we go. That should be the link. So if you're technically minded, you could embed a Google form inside of a web page, and when they submit, do a redirect to a donation page. And it's very, very simple piece of code, but you have to be technically minded. Get at least one person to do this for you if you need them to do it for you. But to have that happen is very, very good because it's just automatic. And then it has to be a monthly donation, right? I've even turned down cash donations a lot, or try to turn a cash donation into a monthly donation. Like, oh, why give me $20 when you can give $3 a month? Like, sounds crazy, but what we're going for is like, a monthly subscription. We want people to be involved and moving up their donations possibly over time. And I'm very paranoid about people thinking of me as this person who just stands around and takes people's cash. Like, I want people to think of this as, a community that we're building. But yeah, that's the poll. So yeah, it is a little social sciencey. The latest one that I did adds a little bit more personal questions to the end.
I was just going to say, I noticed that the flow of the questions does move towards more personal, engaging the person in the last few questions.
Yeah. So the reason a lot of people leave activism is because they weren't thanked, and so asking questions like that is kind of like I don't know why I struggled with creating a poll for so long, like that I had analysis paralysis and was not able to do it because I knew I needed one. And then I had this idea, and it just kind of like lightning came to me. And so that's how this one came about. And then I've stuck with it for 800 people have done this poll. And
so if I can jump in there and say and ask you, if you are at your table, you've had the conversation, there's been a reference to some of the books, and you're at that point where you hand over the poll. I'm assuming you have it on a tablet or something. And at that,
no, they scan it on their phone.
They scan it, and then they're filling it in on their own device.
Oh, somebody's trying to come in. Gene?
I'll admit them. Thanks for that, Will.
Yeah.
Right. So you always have them filling in the poll on their own devices. I'm assuming in some, I suppose most of the world that should work. I'm just wondering whether one can assume that people have devices with them.
Yeah.
Here
So
in the so-called global South, that's not always the case.
Yeah. So I used to do I've done clipboards before. I've got a stack of spreadsheets like this in back there of filled in clipboard stuff. That was the whole last summer was clipboards, but it really changed things when we went to the electronic phone poll.
Much better.
Much better, but it's still possible with spreadsheets and stuff.
So the question I was driving at that point where you hand over the poll, the person standing in front of you at that point asks you, why do you want me to fill in that poll? What is your answer to that?
So it helps get the numbers up. I tell them honestly, like, this is what gets the numbers up.
Maybe something on the lines of it's a small way of having your voice heard.
That might work better.
Got to start somewhere. Got to start somewhere. Right, let's check. Has anybody else got some questions for us? Linda.
Yeah, I just got a really simple logistics question for you, Will. So, I've been doing a little bit of tabling in Rochester, and I really loved your advice about a professional table. I've been kind of taking my Jeep to anywhere I can park and opening up the back and having pamphlets and stuff there. And I have a whiteboard and that was really useful. But I guess I'm just wondering, I'd like to go to farmers markets and start going there soon, and we've got a few co-ops in Rochester as well. I don't know though whether I should be reaching out to people and trying to get a permit before I go, let them know I'm coming. I've already been told once that I can't do that because of COVID restrictions. So I don't know, what are the politics there? Who do you have permission from the organizations that you go to set up every week or whatever, or do you just show up?
I guess it's kind of my fantasy that I'll be arrested for tabling.
Have you been?
No, I've not. No, nobody's even ever asked me to leave or move. I just set up wherever.
Okay.
But I don't set up inside of a farmer's market. I set up outside of it.
Right. Yeah.
But this doesn't work at every farmer's market. It's like one farmer's market that we have, you could approach it from every direction possible. And so I call it chasing people around Shemansky Park. Like you're literally just chasing people all over the place, like running around. And there's no table, and it's a disaster. So you really want to focus. It's best if there's one in and out, but if there's two or three, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Beyond two or three openings, it starts to get to a situation where you're just not reaching enough people.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Do you have chairs at your table, by the way, or do you? I've recently bought a table so I can start tabling. Do you stand or sit? Do you ask people to sit down, or do you stand up and talk to them standing, or does it depend on who the person is or whatever?
The only time I've ever remained seated for the entire thing is when I had somebody in a wheelchair approach.
Yeah.
And
Okay, makes sense.
But other than that, I've mostly stood. I've tried to remain seating, and I'm physically incapable of doing it.
Right. Gerard?
Oh yeah. First, I just want to say thanks for some good advice. One question is, do you normally table solo or do you table with a partner? And do you have any experience about whether one of those works better than the other?
Really good experience and really good question. So it is a necessary thing to have partners at times, because you have to teach other people how to do it and learn from each other. But it's extremely, extremely valuable to have one-on-one conversations and to not jump in there. Even if like you're super, super skilled and your partner is like super unskilled and they're just falling all over the place, it's more valuable to let them complete the entire thing by themselves without interjecting or saving them, or than it is to come in. The reason being, like, it becomes like a Pistons thing. People feel put off by multiple people talking to them. A number of different reasons, but allow them to finish the entire canvas, and then the two of you can discuss like how it went if you want and stuff. But yeah, so like, you know, paying attention to something else, maybe looking like you're looking at your phone or something like that is pretty good. Another chaotic situation that unfortunately happens with multiple people is you'll both start up conversations with folks, and then it becomes another bad situation because it's hard to tell what's going on. It's just chaotic. Like you're losing the entire atmosphere, and there's almost like competition going and stuff. So that could be a little bit difficult to deal with as well. So solo tabling, but bringing in people for training and stuff like that is best.
Thank you. And I just have one other question, which is, do you have any photos that you can show us of your table? You're still on mute, sorry.
Yeah, I meant to download all my photos, and then I totally forgot. So I actually hold on a second. I actually they could still be on. Something I do is I take pictures of my table every day. That's something I do. So I have a huge resource of photos. So I'm gonna go and pull up my Instagram, and hopefully there will be. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So yeah, I do. I post photos of my table to the Instagram story every day, and so they last 24 hours that way, and then they're gone. And so that means I can post every day and not worry about, you know, clogging up the Instagram with my personal story. But yeah, I take pictures every day. And if anybody wants more photos, I could. I'm going to download the entire library of them at some point. I just forgot to.
I have a question.
Please,
Um,
Anne, go.
Do you have a QRS code or something that people can scan to get this poll?
Yeah, so I do. And there's a trick to that as well. So before creating a QR code, you should also shorten your URL, which is another technical nightmare. But the QR code itself will be more complicated the longer the URL is. So the shorter the URL is, the simpler the QR code is going to be, and the more likely people are going to be able to scan it. Because some URL scanners are not that good. So you really want the simplest possible QR code as possible. So to do that, you've got to shorten the URL first. So yeah, it's a two-step process.
I'm not techie. Is there any way you could share yours with us?
Um,
Well, the problem with that would be where the data is going to go.
Right. Okay.
I know you're in XR America, so yeah, I could create
Yeah.
a generic one for all of XR America. I could do that.
Okay. Or one for Miami especially would be good. Yeah. Or Florida.
That I can do that for you, Anne.
Yay. Thank you.
Awesome. That's great question, great answer, and great next step. See, we even get action points out of these training sessions.
Actually, Will, if you could email it to me and also email the link you sent for the poll, that would be super.
Oh,
And
the
that
other
will-
thing
I can
is we also have two polls as well. We have a poll for youth and for adult. So And it's extremely, extremely valuable because obviously you don't want to be asking your youth to be donating. So anybody who I ask them how old they are sometime in the conversation, if I identify them as youth, and then I direct them to a youth poll.
Oh,
Very, very valuable. And that is a good way to get turnout at your actions.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. I see Gerard is asking, what is your cutoff date for cutoff age for youth?
Anybody for the US, people in the youth don't really start working until they graduate high school, and then they immediately start working. So 18 is the age.
And can I maybe ask, if you look back or think back of your tabling experiences, what for you has been the best and what has been the worst experiences?
Yeah, so I think the best experiences have been, strangely enough, I guess, when people already know what Extinction Rebellion is, and they're just like, I'm so glad this is here. And, and they see everything set up and they're just like, I'm jumping in, and they're ready to, donate monthly, come to actions, do the whole shebang. That's always a great, great experience. Um, the bad experience is usually around folks who want to take a long time, and they're either very, very oppositional, like it could be back and forth, it could be one-sided, where they're just hammering you with their diatribe, or they're asking you a ton of questions that you just don't really want to answer all of them, like, because they're not genuinely going to be converted. So yeah, those are frustrating. Yeah.
Having said all of that, would you agree with those who argue that the way to do this is to really try to meet people where they are at? So you're not really trying to convince them of something, but it's a little bit like sweeping the path to somewhere worth going.
Yeah.
Because I found even just looking at the flow chart of the tabling exercise, and I think that was a previous one, that in the context of having XR deep adaptation conversations, we're talking to people literally about collapse and the really dark and scary parts of all of that. It does really seem to help to be very clear about that part, that I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. We're here as facilitators. We can support you on a journey, and we can offer the experiences, background learning, effort and organization that we've managed to put together. But again, going back to what I said at the beginning, we stay out of falling back into that adversarialism that the last 200 million years of evolution has conditioned us to always kind of use as a first resort. Make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of being a kind of a signpost. You just want to be a drop in the water. This 3 or 4 minute conversation is, I feel, a really good way to, because some people are going to come on, a year later. They're going to want to take their own journey.
So it's a little bit like what I suppose the Buddhists would say about detaching from the outcome. You're doing what you're there to do, without getting too invested about where it's going to go. And I suppose, again, that resonates with the larger picture that we're involved in. And the thought that occurs to me in terms of those difficult conversations is perhaps a way of dealing with those is to keep pulling the focus wider. So you're looking at a bigger and a bigger picture up to the point where it becomes so abstract that, look, I've said what I can say to you, here are the resources, but here's someone else that I need to go and speak to.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I'll wave down the next person, but while I'm in the middle of a conversation, and it could be quite rude or off-putting, but it does end the conversation quicker and sometimes results in another successful canvas. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see we've got a text from, is it Jean or Jean? Pleased to be in the call. Yes, unfortunately, you missed most of the actual presentation, Jean. We are recording, and we will make the recording available on the XR World channel, which I will post a link to.
I just posted a link to the presentation. So
Okay, great.
for,
So
for
there's-
the document, I guess. Yeah.
That's great. And speaking of that, Gerard, I think you might have access to some of the documents that was mentioned in the previous call we had about starting groups.
Yeah, I think Rose is.
If you,
Sorry.
I think Rose left the call, but if we could get hold of that to post a copy under the recording as well, appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'll try and get that sorted for tomorrow. Yeah, thanks for the
Another-
reminder.
Another
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
I thought that was next week, Gerard. Have I missed that? I was registered for that. I thought Will's was first and yours from Perth was second.
No, ours was last week, but there is a
Oh, too
recording.
bad. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. There is a
We-
recording, yeah.
Yeah, the recording is up. And I think this link should take you to the recordings. Make it to everyone. Just check for me, because that's it's not the nice and neat shortened link that Will was talking about. It will make a horribly detailed, complex QR code, but it should open the YouTube channel. And then I've just lost my train of thought. Can I check in the meantime? Any other questions? Or
That-
are we
that-
ready?
That YouTube doesn't work. That's the studio link, I think.
Oh God. Okay, let me just go. Channel. Okay.
I've got Gerard's video working. I just clicked on the one at the XR World site.
Okay, great. Right. Quickly check through my notes. Any final questions, or shall we start wrapping up? So by way of wrapping up, I'd like us to go around and do a round of checkouts, where maybe we can each say what has been most, let's use a nice big word, what's been most salient for you out of this call? What's been most valuable or most standout? What's your take home from having been on this call? And if we could start, perhaps Linda, with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. It's all been fabulous for me. I particularly, as somebody starting out, really enjoyed the bit about professionalism. Also, I have more research to do. So those tips about, getting out there and researching the right to rebel, and, Gandhi is a really good example of NVDA and MLK, that kind of stuff. So yeah, thanks so much. Excellent.
Who would you like to pass to?
Gerard.
Cool, thanks. And also, Linda, nice to meet a person from WA in that unexpected place. That's cool. Yeah, thank you very much. Like we've been trying to experiment with a lot of this stuff ourselves, but certainly nowhere near as professional setup as you have. So I think that's some of the stuff that I want to take away, is just in terms of making us look like a professional operation. And also that flowchart is amazing. I want to try and kind of see how we can adapt that for our context here. So yeah, thanks for sharing all those resources.
Someone you'd like to pass to, Gerard?
Sorry, yeah. I'll pass. Well, can I pass to you, Andre?
Yeah. Well, first let me check if Anne, are you still with us?
I am.
All right. would you like to check out quickly?
Sure. The thing I learned most, because I've done lots of canvassing with clipboards. So the thing I learned most is, oh my God, it would be so much easier if I had access to a poll and a QR code and all that stuff, and could just, set up my table professionally and start talking to people and give them this. It would be so much easier.
Hmm.
Thank you.
And shall we see if, is it Jean? Are you with us? Would you like to join for a checkout? Okay, well, on my side, I also want to say thank you, Will. It's been really awesome. We were talking about the fact that a fundraising themed call might not be as exciting to a lot of people as a lot of the other things that we do, and yet it is so, so critical. And it's not just about the fundraising, it's about getting people in and kind of holding that seed of what XR is about, I think.
Yes.
It's been awesome to go through the kind of real world logistics and nuts and bolts of it all. I mean, I know as an artist, when I'm busy with an important piece of work, I want to have all my paraphernalia within reach so that I don't have to take my focus away from what I'm doing.
Right.
And I think we probably need, that's probably part of the professionalism that you're talking about, is having your stuff, knowing that the right stuff's in place, it's ready, and you can focus on the people that you're actually dealing with and the overall process, the numbers game part of it, as well as, just the energy of it. So I'm actually quite excited for more of us to get into doing this out there in the real world. And I invite everyone to give us feedback about how it's going in our future calls. And with that, I'll check over to Will for a checkout.
Yeah, thank you. I think I was been pretty nervous, and I'm still really nervous.
You did great.
But thanks for everybody for being so supportive, and I really hope this information is useful. All right, and I'd be happy to hear if anybody has any technical questions and needs assistance. I'm here for it as well.
Thank you so much. Those of you who want to exchange email addresses perhaps can do so through the chat. We won't be publishing the chat. And then just a reminder that we have a call happening this Thursday on organizing a rebellion.
Yes.
That is a dramatic and exciting theme for a call. And they go hand in hand. So with that, from my side and the team side, I thank you all very, very much for having been here. And please keep an eye out in your mailboxes and other media channels for our follow-up events. Have yourself an awesome rest of your day.